Hello, everyone. Kevin Harvell and Gus Emery here from STLTechTalk.com at the Kansas City Developer Conference, KCDC 2014, here with Muljadi Budiman. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well, doing well. So you're here speaking.
Yes.
Speaking at KCDC. How did you already had one this morning, correct?
I had my first, the session was actually the first session of the day.
First session of the day.
It's one of those things where, hey, it's good, let's get it out of the way, but I still have 2 more to go tomorrow.
Good. All right. So what did you speak on this morning?
So this morning's session is about introduction to iOS development, essentially how to develop, let's say, using Apple's proper way for iPhones and iPads.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So would you say that that's an easy way or a difficult way to develop for iOS?
At the start, most probably a lot of people will say it's the harder approach.
Okay.
On the other hand, I am glad that I took it about 4 years ago because it teaches me quite a bit. And, as developers, we try to expand our horizons, even for those that, for the most part, a lot of people use Windows for development over here.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, you want to be able to make sure that you know about other technologies, emerging technologies. So you want to make sure that, let's say, at least for server-side software, you have Linux-based base, or for those that possibly go into OS 10 development and all that. And this is just another item in the tool bag
Mm-hmm.
that we can possibly use and learn more about things.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of iOS development, do you have any apps available in the App Store that you've created, or is it just something you do, like create an app just for myself? Or
Well, obviously, when I first started, the goal is to try to create the next Angry Birds, right?
Well, yeah, who doesn't want to do that?
Yes. But during just the course of my learning and development, I guess I mentioned it to enough people where then I get these calls from people that are interested on making iOS software, mobile apps, and I ended up actually making software for them, but I myself do not have any software published. So I have published 4 iOS applications and 2 Android applications for clients so far, but none of my own.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Even though they're not your own, they're still
True.
Yeah, you still help do it. So why don't you give me, since you brought that up, what's the difference between iOS and Android in development?
Well, the environment is just different. The libraries are different. For the most part, iOS uses Objective-C, so it's a bit, let's say, less managed, less refined language compared to .NET or Java.
Okay.
So the concepts and how you develop is also a bit different. The libraries obviously are very different. And for those that actually have C and C++ background, they have a leg up because the concepts are more easily transferable. Those that are used to .NET and Java development are more used to having, hey, we have this set of libraries, it's pretty nice, I can just download it, I can try to find somebody that has possibly made something like this and use it.
IntelliSense helps me.
There is, well, 4 years ago, the IntelliSense on the Xcode, which is the development environment that Apple provides, it's there, and I'm being nice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's getting better, though. It's getting
That's
better.
good.
Yeah, well, it's things have to evolve, right? They were using it in-house beforehand until it really came out, 4 or 5 years ago in the iPhone, right? Or how long has the iPhone been out now?
It's a 6 or 7.
Six
I
or
mean, we're on
7 years.
we're on
6
the
to 7 years.
5S, so that's there's the 3G, the 4, the 4S, the 5, the
So
5S.
it's probably been 7 years then. So, have you seen a huge movement towards iOS recently? Is it falling off? Is it taking the same momentum? What do you think, development-wise or app-wise?
This is, unfortunately, there's 2 answers to that, because what happens is that there's a lot more Android devices out there. I believe 80% of any mobile devices being sold right now uses Android as an operating system. On the other hand, statistically speaking, it has been proven that iOS users buy more stuff.
Right. They buy more apps, that's for sure.
Yeah, they definitely buy more apps.
Correct. So there is this incentive that even though you would like to be cross-platform or make your applications available in as many platforms as possible, iOS is still the preferred choice for development, because for those that, whether you're relying on the free-to-play market where you have microtransactions, you use ad impressions, or you actually sell your applications, the iOS market gives you much more leverage just because from the fact that the market is available and there are people that's just looking at applications coming in and they say, that looks interesting, I'm just going to buy that.
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up. How have your interactions with the Apple Store been? Because I know that there have been tons of complaints about, getting apps in and getting them approved and things like that. Have you seen any of that? Have they changed things that you know of lately that you want to share?
No. Full disclosure, my apps did get declined a couple of times, but it's mainly because of the reasons that they have listed in their documents. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's a fairly thick document,
right.
So you just kind of have to go through it. For instance, one of the clients wanted essentially a shell for their website. They don't want to go through creating an actual mobile site, so they just say, well, can you just make it such that it has all our information within the app? So we went through that, and what happened is that Apple sees it as, well, it's the same content as your website, so we're not going to allow it. It was brought upon early on in terms of, well, they did say that. So we kind of have a plan B where since Apple provides push notification, we say that if Apple rejects it, we're going to put in the push notification. Then that makes it an Apple-centric, let's say, feature. Okay. So now that passes through. Even though from a push notification perspective, the company itself, since it is available, they do use it, but they don't use it as much as just providing new content for the site.
So in terms of that, and you've done Android apps as well, would you say that Apple is more rigid, Android, the Google Play Store is more rigid, or are they just rigid for good reasons, both of them independently?
Well, the Google Play Store actually goes to the very, very far extreme. There is nothing or any entity that oversees it. So you can actually produce a really bad software, even just a blank screen, and you upload it to the Google Play Store and you publish it, and it will be published.
That would be the I Am Rich app, right?
One of them, yes. Full disclosure, I did not buy any of them.
Yeah, me either.
Right, so, and another reason possibly that you hear a lot of developers leaning towards iOS is the fact that with the iPhone, historically, the screen size on the iPhone hasn't changed until the iPhone 5 came out. And
Yes.
that's when they bumped it up a little bit, gave you an extra row for icons and stuff. So I know that's one reason why a lot of developers focus on that, because it's a constant set of devices. I mean, the internal hardware changes, but the display, you don't have to worry about it not optimizing for the different resolutions. With like Android, you've got 3.5-inch devices all the way up to 6-inch devices, and then of course
Different
tablets.
size tablets. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think
And
that's-
multiple resolutions in every single size, too.
Right.
So you have to code for a ton of different pieces if you want your app to be generally available, right? Not just available for a specific device.
It depends on how the app looks like. Obviously, if you want the application to look drastically different in different resolutions, yes, then you need to put in a lot more effort on the Android side. But the Android UI is actually, I wouldn't say the same, but it has similar features to HTML where you can follow a nice flow layout, so everything kind of fills in. Mm-hmm. So it's not really size or resolution critical that much, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. The bigger problems, however, is just that the multitudes of devices and the firmware or how the OS is configured in each devices sometimes can be suboptimal. There will be situations where you would use the correct API in Android to ask, well, does this device have feature X? And it will return yes, but then when you try to use it, nothing happens because that feature was not actually there. Mm-hmm. In fact, in one of the earlier builds of the Android Development Toolkit, when I was trying to play around with it, my Nexus 7, and I was trying to think, well, maybe there's a way that I can make a sort of a keyboard that has a haptic feedback. Whenever I type, it kind of jiggles a bit, vibrates. And looking at the API, asking, does this device has a vibration module? It returns yes, even though it is totally incorrect. So the Apple side, in this case, since their devices are more streamlined, they don't have as many models, they know exactly what's in there, is a lot more polished because of that regard.
I was going to say that I think Apple has been a lot more polished for the developer just because of the less flavors, right?
Yes.
There are less devices on the market. I mean, there's only 5 or 6 devices total.
Right.
So you have that ability. Have you touched Windows at all? Windows Mobile?
I actually had a chance to start on a Windows Mobile project about 5-6 months ago. So, and learning new stuff to some extent. I do have experience with WPF and Silverlight, so I understand enough of the XAML ecosystem and how to use it properly. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, to me, the development ease is much easier than both Android and iOS because I don't do those, right? It's different because I come from the Microsoft ecosystem and WPF. So to me, it's fairly easy. But for you, since you've touched all of them, is there one that's easier? Is there? I mean, we've already talked about that most developers go for one because of
Right.
app purchases and whatnot. But for the developer, what would be the easiest? Would you say? I know you mentioned C and C++ before, but
Well, my mention on the C++ is mainly just to say it gives those developers with those backgrounds a bit of a leg up. In my session, I actually showed how different it is, and one of the impetus of me trying to learn Xcode Objective-C was because I looked at it and I read about the articles about iPhone development, and I thought, well, I have plenty of C++ experience. Objective-C can't be that bad. I went to Wikipedia.
I've heard it is.
Went to Wikipedia, and they had a small sample of what Objective-C code looks like. I could not understand it.
Wow.
So it was just distinctly different. So during the session, I showed how different it is, and there's quite a few chuckles in terms of just how weird the syntax is.
And that actually stands out because a C++ developer can fairly easily move into Java,
Yes.
JavaScript, and C# per se, right?
Yes.
I mean, there are nuances, but the format and the functionality and the layout of the code is very similar.
At the very least, you would be able to read one.
Where if you read the words Objective-C, you would assume that it would be exactly the same, right?
Correct.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I haven't tried to tackle it yet, but I'd love to.
So is your Android presentation, is it going to be very similar to your iOS?
To some extent, yes. For the most part, I would imagine there's a bigger audience for it because if you know .NET, C#, Java is not all that different. The IDE, and for the presentation tomorrow, I will be using Eclipse.
Yep.
It has its own quirks, but for the most part, once you get a project and you edit code, then it's just simple development. Quite a bit of the information that I will mention tomorrow is mostly about how does the UI tie to the code, and that's because for each of these different platforms, they're just different. And once you kind of get over that hump, as long as you know about programming logic, then you just need to put in the code that works.
And for those Microsoft developers, I mean, there's a lot of Azure mobile services that also have the snippets to bring your data back to iOS and Android, where then your piece of binding your data to your UI is more important than actually worrying about the data because that's fairly easy to get.
Yes.
Right?
Actually, this is where all of these mobile developments, to some extent, it expands the horizons of the typical developers because most mobile apps right now still needs to be able to connect somewhere, try to get data from somewhere.
Yes.
Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, there is really no, let's say, Objective-C library to create web services.
No, you're
So you would create web services using either a .NET base or possibly Java base. So now, with just trying to develop on the iOS platform, you learn a new language, but you still also get to use your existing skills in creating these web services that your mobile apps may possibly call.
So then I'm going to throw this. This is a huge softball, but if you were to talk to a client or a company that wants to move into the mobility world, what would your first step be before you hit that mobility world? Would it be changing over to like a service-based web API style backend so that the data can tie fluently between their regular apps and a mobile app, or would you say design from the ground up and build your data layers and your web app at the same time?
Well, as with most answers to questions like that, the answer usually starts with it depends, right?
Of course it does.
On the other hand, given how data and mobile is getting larger and larger every day, I think it behooves most companies to try to make sure that their data can be retrieved or accessible from the outside through a set of web services or whatever layer that they would like to put in. After that's achieved, whether that is accessed through a simple website, JavaScript, web service calls, actual desktop clients, or a mobile device becomes less relevant.
Yeah, and you can just reskin the top of it very simply and quickly.
Correct.
Website, mobile device, iOS, Android, Windows, tablets, whatever, just flow right from that piece if your data layers are set up properly.
Definitely.
I would totally agree. Anything else, Kevin?
No. What is your third talk going to be about?
The third talk would be about Code First Entity Framework.
Okay.
Oh,
So
that's interesting.
it's 3 sessions on 3 different platforms, 3 different IDEs, 3 different languages.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely keeping you on your toes, that's for sure.
yes.
Definitely learn a lot from you.
Yeah, the attendees are definitely getting their money's worth out. They
Yeah.
make sure to hit all your sessions.
Either that or possibly, well, this guy may not know a lot in all of these, just a little bit here and there.
Right.
It's enough to be dangerous, and it's enough to share knowledge, and that's what people want
Right.
to know here.
That's huge. So what
Definitely
is it
hope
that,
so.
that keeps you coming back to, KCDC's, the St. Louis Days of .NET, conferences like that? What is it that keeps you coming back to speak at these?
Well, I have to say, it's encouraging for me to, I mentioned this to somebody else earlier. I've seen in the past 3 years, and granted that the economy is starting to turn back, but in the past 3 years, the IT community, both in St. Louis and Kansas City, have just started to grow rapidly. The quality of the people have definitely grown, and there's a lot of interest, both from companies and just from people wanting to get into IT in general.
Right.
So I would not say that what I'm doing is selfless. So there's some self-gratification of just kind of seeing, hey, you know what? There's people that are growing here, and I kind of help them with that. Hopefully so. So that's one of my motivations behind it.
Good. Well, I'm glad you were able to come back, and hopefully everybody's enjoying your morning talk, and hopefully everybody enjoys your 2 tomorrow.
Hopefully so. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming out, Mole.
Thanks,
Nice to
Mo.
see you
It's a
again.
pleasure to see you again.
Great to see you guys. So always a joy.
All right.
Thanks so
Bye.
much for joining us.
Thank you.